Hello. This feels weird looking at the back of the camera. It's the strangest thing. Strangest thing, portal. It's a portal right into another world that is way out of, has nothing to do with what I'm planning to talk about. That you're seeing now, but for me, that's then. So for you, then is what is then to me is now for you. It's like technology is building a portal between two times. And if experience is what depicts the abstraction that we call time, then is it really two separate times? So it's like a game, a metaphor, but it's literally as if the future is on the other end of that lens. Strange, but just because it just so happens to be that that's how it's going to be perceived by somebody else. Absolutely nothing to do with what I plan to talk about. Just how things normally go. I'm a little hopped up on caffeine right now. Chai tea. Maybe I should. Brought to you by tea with 900 grams of caffeine. But it's really clean. Like you can probably tell I'm pretty much like this is like legal crack or something. And it's like it's really clean. If I have this much stimulation from some of the types of coffee that are out there, I'll get like chest pains and blood pressure spikes and a whole bunch of nasty stuff, headaches and things like that. Which is why I usually don't get this stuff because I already drank half of the container. Anyway, this is a more serious conversation with myself and the abstraction in the future of others that are occurring. I'm gonna start rambling, and it's not one of like the more darker ones, but it's a dark topic. It's actually, if you want to look at it, it's actually, I can't really judge as far as things that have happened to individuals or myself versus what's going on with this generation and early generations or later generations, and it's just an extension of the same thing, one version of programming, and how it happens in these other situations, maybe these covert situations, and how it happens overtly to a large number of people, literally everyone, unless you protect yourself. And that's one of the main things in terms of having to do with this mass programming, is that everyone is under mass mind control. You'll have to resist or have some type of special outlook, if you will, in order to avoid that. There's really no just like, well, it didn't happen to have any effect on me whatsoever. That person is belonging to a group of a genotype, or I don't even know if that's the word. I might have slurred two prefix and suffix there, but invented a new one. But the concept is there, and if somebody's like naturally resistant, well, they tested the population in ways to figure out, okay, well, this is that group that we noticed over in this country or this culture or whatever that is resistant, and they found out how to apply these methods to that individual, level of resistance, and then work that into this synthesis for the whole world, synthesize that into this platform that is then mass applied to everyone. So it's kind of how it works, and then instead of one specific method that they use to match everyone, basically instead of one specific method for it's so strange. It's as well one specific method for everyone, and this is they here is a completely generalized term. It's people, advertisers, it's bankers, it's whatever. It's teachers that go purely by the book when they're not supposed to, and it's clearly wrong. It's whoever, anyone that's kind of protecting that which must change for people to progress. And progressive is like a corrupted term. Everything is corrupted, but it's as much of one method that is then applied as a blanket methodology to everyone, as well as it is specific, integrative layering of methods within methods that are individually directed and applied towards every different type of culture and group that is out there. But the concept here that I'm leading into now is that the way the younger generations are treated is pretty much like experiments. It's like experimental animals or test subjects. From the chemicals in the food, okay, to simply the kinds of foods. It's not just the chemicals in the foods. Maybe this feels a little more direct looking at the round eye that I'm staring into now, the black round eye. If anybody got that last time. Actually, I didn't make that video public. And so the idea is that this chair is squeaking. Reminds me of the old secretary chairs. Alright, and I'm not like too stimulated now. It's just, this is like because from this, where I'm coming at with this information is like direct experience, and everyone's seen it, but I've seen it bad. I've seen people get destroyed from this, from turning away from family and friends or the system and rebelling or going into submission, and nothing works unless you do your own thing. But the main idea is that drugs, food, technology, information, and affection, or social influence, and literal like sensory stimulation with people, they're all the same thing, and they're all incorporated into this control system. There are more kindergartners on drugs than there are humans on the planet on drugs. Either that or it's more Americans. Might be more Americans. I hope it is, actually. But it's one of those, at least that's what we're told. But as far as I'm concerned, I can only imagine that it's not far from the truth. And, put that into perspective now for what that means for where we're heading, how the mental sphere, the brain itself, and the methods of control and understanding in this society is developing in terms of, where we could be. I know everybody loves the burp pauses. Where we could be if we either didn't need to have that, or if we don't already need to have that, if we simply didn't have that, or if we did need to have it, but we could overcome it using our own strength and not having everybody drugged down. Where we could be, eventually it's going to get to a point where it's going to be where we could be and where we are, and it's going to be two completely different civilizations or even species, especially if some of these drugs and foods and chemicals are warping DNA and ultimately consciousness itself. You got to put it together. Over short term, you got anything in your environment that constitutes an overall adaptation. People don't, I'm just going to say, they're not going to evolve into different beings. That might be a story. But there's specialization where they get better at whatever they're doing. Muscles get more refined, brain tissue gets more refined, the regions shuffle around. In 30 days, you meditate or practice something or complain all the time, like the study showing complaining rewires the brain to get it more sensitive to depression, okay? And meditation does that, and age regresses the brain. It makes it seem younger and more malleable. 30 days of doing something repeatedly with intention changes the brain. It changes the structure. Any physical talent, exercise, anything that you do, you'll get better at, and you'll specialize over a short amount of time. So what are these chemicals? What is this technology? What is the rate of information and the sorry, I'm touching my face a lot. I'm getting like antsy. What is all of that doing over a few years, a generation? There's a change. Don't say there's not a change. There's a huge change. So what's that going to do over a few generations? What has it done already? People complain. Men are like this, women like that, little girls are like this, boys are doing this. The adults that are running the place are doing this, and other people burying their heads in the sand are doing this. And it was not like that a few generations ago. There were people who were like this, but it was not entirely like that, okay? It was different. And so that's what it is. It's just what it is. And we can change that. However, we got to know what's going on. We got to know the body. We got to know the neurochemistry. We got to know the biology. We have to know the ins and outs with consciousness, with personality manipulation, with I need water. With I'll just drink this caffeine tea. With these tactics, basically how biology works, and these tactics that are used, they have to be acknowledged, they have to be revoked, and our own power has to be restored, which is just a conscious decision, a choice, and it's a choice for self-accountability and to act in knowledge, not in ignorance. And so the idea, though, I want to present a little presentation display of how, with just a few different methods, a few different tactics, all converging at the same point, nearly every angle of the child's mind is covered. So I've seen this personally, and I know others have too, at least one or more of these. Imagine a household where as soon as the children wake up, whether they're 5 or 6, maybe even younger, to 7, 13, and 14, 15, 16, it is easy to see this. Especially if they're in school, especially if they have a phone. Because TV used to be the first one. Then came the computer, and then now it's all in your hand, your pocket. So the first thing they do in the morning is wake up and look at a screen. So I know a lot of you have probably seen the talk, well, I don't think it was a TED talk, but it was a, presumably knowledgeable person speaking about the reinforcement of social stimulation relating to biological stimulation, literally neurochemical stimulation in the form of a dopamine release in the brain when a person gets a text, when they're communicating across the internet, usually in a phone or something like that, that there's a stimulation, there's a high from that. So the idea is that studies have shown that screen, that glowing, crystal clear, almost neon screen, when a person first sees that, chemical reactions are initiated in the brain that have not occurred before throughout the entirety of a person's life. Imagine, just go back, think back to the first time you saw the iPhone or even a video game screen, because it's pretty much the same thing with a video game. Those colors, the edges, the depth, the brightness, the richness and the texture, we don't see that in reality. The brain sees that and goes, what is this? Why does it look like that? It gets stimulated. It actually produces a dopamine response every time you look at your screen. That's why if you've ever seen, and I know you've done this before because I've done it before, and I didn't get a phone until a couple years ago because technically didn't need it. Usually if you're working in contracting, working in that eventually you have to get a phone because it's just how it's going to work. Everybody's using it for business. If you're in IT or anything like that, usually it's on there, but the idea is that I refused. I was the only guy ever, all these people, no, I won't have a phone, screw that. Honestly, I was more in touch with myself, but that's how it is. And but the first time you see it, you get that effect. And if you're ever in public and there's 5-10 minutes, you're in line or queue, as they say across the pond, or just anywhere, the bus or train or something, say you don't have any more data time left and you don't have anything to watch or any games to play, there's been one time where you literally just look at your phone. And you might move some apps around, scroll over, and you're literally just looking at glowing pixels. That's it. That's all you're doing. And so it's pretty foreign. It's pretty alien. And the effect that it has on the brain is unnatural. And it is essentially addictive in nature. It is neurochemical and stimulating in nature, overstimulating. Then factor in that the electromagnetic signals create a similar change that MSG, monosodium glutamate, creates, which is an excitotoxin response which is basically the brain heating up and moving into an overactive state, which induces free radical damage. Put 2 and 2 together, people. They're frying the brain, and they're making you feel good doing it. Look at David D's like political, extravagant, exaggerated cartoons. That's what's going on. Plus, if you could see in the energy spectrum through these devices that they have, or say you figured out how to do it without that, you see these chemical waves coming out eating the brain. The field, the shield of the mind begins to die down. And it actually sympathetically resonates with the stuff coming out of the phone. And somebody said, no, on YouTube, Richie from Boston, and I usually don't shout people out, especially if they're well known, because honestly a lot of them are from the bases. Not saying he is or anything like that, but a lot of these people, like, it's another, internet is the next avenue. Okay, so all bases are covered. But if there's a plan, all right, look, if the system is activated, the phone itself can tap into the mind and create these hallucinations. So, something to look out for. But the idea is, it can entrain, it can create a sympathetic resonance, and then the mind will begin to tie into, interface into these very, very complicated and powerful computer systems. I mean, if your phone can connect to a signal from a tower that's miles away, the tower's strong or your phone's strong or both. You gotta imagine how it's working. And so, I mean, if it's a satellite, even better. How many miles away that? So this is one aspect, technology. Wake up in the morning, before they do anything, their brain is already hooked. They're getting that well, technically it is an excitotoxin response because there's always Wi-Fi going around. And that visual stimulation, which creates a neurochemical release, a reaction, a dopamine release. And so, first thing in the morning, hit number 1. You got your techno crack. All right, and so then what happened? And okay, so this is now lacking emotional feedback. It's lacking that organic interplay of 2 sentient beings that can know one another through their own responses and effects on one another, this feedback. That means they're being stunted, and they're interacting with a computer system, a game system, intelligence, an artificial intelligence. The more they do that, the less capable they will be to interact in society and manage their emotions and really interact properly. There's something else to say, but that was from a different conversation I'm trying to like make pop back up in my head. I think it's well, that's later, but it gets used as like a treat, basically. If they're sad or something, they get, well, this ties into it. So say now they have that fix, that addictive quality. Now, I know you've heard or read about how a crying child or something like that, they get tossed an iPad or something, and they instantly stop and they're taken away. So now it's not only a natural addiction or an unnatural addiction to something they can basically naturally get in their environment at all times, then it becomes used by the adult as a kind of pacifier, as a literal techno drug in times of emotional distress, which does not teach them to manage their emotions. It does not teach them to overcome. It teaches them to submit to technology. It's not even another person. And it's not even like a blanket or a doll or something. It's a box. It's a monolith, okay? It's an alien. That's the alien. That thing. It's the alien. So I don't like looking at the round eye. The alternate dimensional being. And so, fix number 1, rerouting the desires, the intentions, and emotionally stunting the individual. Day 1, first thing in the day, morning. And so, and it's addicting. So then, now what happens next? I know I should have wrote that down. Excuse me. I should have wrote that down earlier. Because there was the techno aspect of stimulation, but then there was another interplay along with the emotional stunting. It has something to do with the way the parents use it as a pacifier. And then there's another effect from that. Maybe I'll remember it and add it in or something like that. But what's hit number 2? It all ties together. So what do they do normally in the morning, along with their phones and their Game Boys or whatever it is? Eat breakfast. And what is being pushed to these children through the adults as breakfast these days? In school, daycare, hopefully not at daycare if they can choose. It's definitely at school. What is happening at school and home? What are they eating? Pure sugar, carbohydrates, additives, coloring, preservatives, processed wheat, and flavorings, artificial flavorings, as well as the stimulation of colors and such. You know, looking at the back of the cereal box with the crazy colors and so on and so forth, that was like the first iPad, okay? Just staring at like the back of a Trix box or something, and it's just, they're made like that for a reason. It's the craziest thing, and it's association as well. And again, this is affection, this is stimulation, but in an unnatural way. It's to feed into an addiction. So sugar addiction's as strong, if not stronger, than heroin, okay, or cocaine, and it actually produces a cocaine high, similar to the same regions of the brain acting up. I'm telling you, it's all scientifically proven. If you want to call it science, it's really just common sense. Oh, duh. People can't get over a certain thing. What is it? Well, neurochemistry. What else is it going to be? Not doing it for the hell. And they're hooked as children. What do you get when what is the incentive to do good on the test? You get a little Tootsie Roll or something, some crap. Something that you might as well came into a crap on the teacher's desk, and here you go, a big candy bar. That's what that stuff does to the teeth and the mind and the body. And so, from a young age, it's a business. That's legal cartel. Legal cartel, right in front of everybody's faces. Billions of dollars, massive losses, massive collateral damage, right in front of everybody's faces. Oh, it doesn't matter. We've been doing it forever. All right. And so, again, there are high carb diets which are used in mind control. In military manuals on how to break a subject or a prisoner. Feed them a high carb diet so they're feeling full, but it's nutritionally empty, and eventually they lose B12, they go into beriberi, their neurochemical processes begin to break down, they can't sleep properly, they get overrun with candida and bacterial infections, and they go insane. Their nails get brittle, their hair falls out. Alright? So, sugar feeds that process, processed foods feeds that processed. Wow, I'm effing up words real bad right now. But it makes sense, at least. And additives, the coloring. It is possibly the worst thing that can be done for the children. You know, you can probably think of other things, but this is what's happening to everyone in mass. You don't gotta go somewhere to see this, it's everywhere. And they're abused because they think it's good, because they're taught that it's okay and they love it. Which again, that's the difference between the spirit and the mind, or the spirit and the body. One is desire-based, one is air-based or ether-based. It's not form, I guess. It's or maybe it's form versus matter, or beyond that it's abstraction or meaning versus format or definition. And so but in a way maybe all format, because format isn't really formally definite in terms of matter and physicality. It's more of an abstraction, which is what it really is, but that means that anything that is restricted to the body and desires in the physical existence is a kind of a program. It's not going to yield the unveiling of the soul, the liberation of the true self. It's just a program. So it's like you turn a computer on and say, do this over and over again, and now it's doing that. You think, I want to do this because it feels good a certain way. It's a program. It's a computer system. So that which isn't, a part of that, that which is separate from that processing system, that's what's real, that's what the spirit is about, and that is undefinable. It's this, it's that, it's an abstraction, it's everywhere. You can do whatever you want. It's just you. That's it. It's the only definite, the only consistency, or the what's the word? Not similarity, but the only right, the defining value is that it is you in terms of what is more than physical, and what is the meaning aspect of that, the consciousness aspect, the intellectual aspect. And so that's hit number 2. You got the carbs and sugar. It's really a drug. And then the wheat and the processed wheats and things like that, and the carbs, they break down into sugar, glucose, I think. And so basically, it's a chemical addiction. It releases dopamine in the brain. It creates an addiction. It restructures the brain. It weakens the body. It causes a physical and cognitive or emotional addiction. And it causes a physical disease in terms of the effect, as well as the imbalance of the good, bad bacteria and fungal outbreaks, namely candida. And so that's hit number 2, strike 2. And again, that's used as part of this pseudo-affection. So the title of this article I was going to write is how technology, information, processed foods, and pseudo-affection, affection, is ruining this generation. And information I didn't touch upon is because while they're on the internet, it's not just games, they're also going to YouTube and other places, and there's a lot of information, and it is mind boggling. They're picking up impressions and changing the way they think and changing the way they view the world, and it's simply how it is. It's happening a lot. They're basically being indoctrinated. It's like a best friend or something like that through their system. So, excuse me for these yawns. So strike 3 is what? It's when it's all tied together. And you get, for instance, somebody trying to take away these toys, these tools, these chemicals, these pacifiers. What does the children do usually, the child? They usually seek affection from the one who's taking away the pacifier. And this is no different than a heroin addict going to the person they know has the heroin and begging and pleading and trying to get on their good side so they can get one more hit. That's what happens. That's what they're reduced to. And so what does the parent who does not know this and lacks discipline do? They usually give in, or they offer sympathy and affection in the short term or in the moment to bring about a short-term resolution, which leads to a long-term impairment of emotional stability and processing, the ability to process and know, what's going on, and integrate into society in a beneficial and well-adjusted manner, to the point where they become screwed later on when nobody's hugging them and giving them an iPad and a lollipop because they're mad for whatever reason at age 18, 19, 20. That doesn't happen. What does happen is they have jails and prisons with private contractors who literally make money putting people away. That's it. That's how they make their cake. So, what do you know? And that affection could be anything from a hug to a soothing voice to continually permitting and allowing the use or the abuse and misuse of technology and poisonous foods that are weaponized, as well as everything else weaponized into these soft kill tactics, and allowing that to act as a pacifier, giving them what they want, even though it's killing at least their mind. We all know later on that's how it works. It takes time and it affects the whole body. It's not something that's supposed to take place immediately. but it is something that takes place. And so we have this triangle, trifecta of body, mind, and emotion, spirit control. And the people who have the ability to stop that don't even know it's taking place. They know something's wrong, but they don't realize they've been duped into literally addicting, treating their kids like an addict, but not realizing it, that that's what they're doing to their brain,